So have you ever tried to learn a language and it just seems that you forget every word that you try to learn, and it gets more and more frustrating as days go by and you feel like you're making no progress and you still feel like you can't communicate basic ideas with natives of the language? Now, if that sounds a little too familiar, I have a few tips that have helped me in my language learning journey that can definitely help you. And they're very simple, okay? And language learning is simple, and I'm gonna explain it here today. Now, I'm gonna say this nice and early. You don't need to live in the country that the language is spoken in order to learn a language. You don't. It's an excuse. If you're learning a language and you feel like not being in the country is holding you back, that is a cope. I'm sorry. Now, does it help to live in a country where the language is spoken? Yes. But why? Because you will be more immersed, just forced into immersion. But this can be created in this day and age synthetically, digitally. You don't actually have to be in the country to simulate the environment that is required in order for you to absorb the language. So this is where voluntary immersion comes in. And this is the key. This is the thing that's going to take you from literally knowing nothing of a language all the way to fluency. Why? Because our brains adapt to information based on how frequently we use it, and also based on how relevant it is to our lives. So, for instance, have you ever thought about buying a car? Maybe your friend's thinking about buying a car and you kind of research it and you look it up, etc., etc., etc. And you're like, yeah, that's a great car. And then literally the next day or that same day, you see that car more often than you ever have in your life. It's not because God's playing tricks on you, he wants to troll you, right? It is literally your reticular activation system in play, okay? So the more information you consume that your brain is gonna deem as relevant based on how recently it was received, that's how likely you are to be able to identify the information that you've received in real life in the physical form. So how does this relate to languages? Well, if you are every single day exposing yourself and immersing yourself within a language and hearing a bunch of vocabulary every single day, your brain is going to become more proficient at picking out those words and deciphering their meaning and deciphering the relevancy of the words. So the more you listen to a language, whether it be through podcasts, music, TV shows, whatever, your brain's becoming more efficient in compiling all of this information so that it can be recalled in the future. And as you're listening to this content, your reticular activation system is going to be picking out the relevant words that you remember learning in the past. So for instance, what I do, I walk to the gym and I listen to a podcast in Spanish every time. If I hear a word that I don't understand, I take it, right? I literally stop walking, take my phone out, write it down, translate it on the translator or whatever, write it down and store it into a flashcard deck. Now, the next time that word comes up, I'm going to be so much more likely to remember it, given that I have given it the attention that I gave it by looking up the word and putting it into a flashcard deck, into Anki. Next time I hear or see the word, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb, because my reticular activation system has now decided that it's important, so we're gonna make sure that you see it. Kind of how it works. But in even simpler terms, immersion just serves as a way for your brain to acclimatize to the language. Because as a baby, how do you learn a language? You literally are just hoisted into an environment, people say things to you, you start to process it slowly, 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 and eventually you start to create output for yourself with what you've taken in. So that's why it's so important to absorb as much of the language as you can, even passively sometimes. You don't have to always actively learn a language, okay? You can be driving in your car, on the bus, walking, whatever, and listening to the language. And I credit most of my gains in Spanish to that very practice, which is immersing myself from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep. If I'm consuming content, it's in Spanish or my target language. So the next gem you need to adhere to is to read, because I'm telling you now, reading doesn't only build your language skills in a language that you're trying to learn, but for me, I can say this wholeheartedly. Reading as a young kid, studying English as an English man, helped me so much with the language. I was one of the top students in my class in English all the time because I would read all the Harry Potter books, all the Percy Jackson books, all these random novels. But the fact of the matter is I was immersing myself in the language even further by reading, and nothing changed when I went to go and learn Spanish. Now, when I was learning Spanish, I started with books like these. A lot of you guys sleep on these kinds of books. This one was written by Ollie Richards, or composed or constructed by Ollie Richards, right? There's like a bunch of books like this. I'm not sponsored, but I can recommend it. I can testify this helped me so much in the beginning of my Spanish journey, right? Reading books like this, it goes from beginner to advanced. But basically, essentially, it's just short stories that are comprehensible, and it's basically about getting comprehensible input. So by reading books like this that are basically kids' books, let's have it right. It's basically a child's book. But by reading them, you're basically reenacting the process of learning a language as a child, which is what you would have done. You would have read books in class, at home, with your parents or whatever, and learn the language that way through these short stories that were exciting and interesting. And yeah, you can see how vocabulary that you know is used in context through these stories. To make this habit entirely undisputable in terms of its effectiveness, you need to be reading out loud. And what I'll do usually, I'll literally go to my car and read out loud in silence with my book in Spanish. Now, this doesn't only improve your reading ability, but it also improves your speaking ability because you're verbalizing what you're reading. So you're training the two things at one time. So you're getting the input and the output, which is what you need. You need both. So if you're trying to learn a language and you're still not reading, I'm telling you, you're holding yourself back. Reading will allow you to basically adapt to the language way faster. Now, as much as input's very important and it's probably the most important at the start, you need to be getting output. So you need to start talking with natives and experiencing the language in real time. Now, this is something that I neglected at the beginning of my journey because I focused on input, which I think is a good idea, but I definitely could have got more output done in the earlier stages. So by basically speaking with natives, you're having to go through this process of active recall. And every word that you've learned, you now have to use your brain to try and recall this information and use it in real time under time pressure. And if you do this enough, obviously you're going to improve so much more. Now, if you don't have access to natives, there is no excuse. We're in the day and age where we have the internet, we have things like italki, we have Discord servers, etc., etc. You can literally either pay to talk to people in the native language, or you can do it for free on Discord through kind of language exchange thing. Or you can just record yourself, which is what I did a lot. I just recorded myself, talked to myself, all that kind of stuff. So throughout my day, I'm trying to think in the target language as much as I can. Immersion on your commute to and from work, etc., passively. And then you're talking to yourself as you're doing something passively. You know, you're not actually exerting that much effort to actually learn the language, which is great because in that way it becomes fun. So don't ignore the importance of output. Make sure you're talking the language. Make sure you're actually speaking the words that you're learning. Otherwise, it's just going to go in one ear, stay in your brain, but then using it's going to be a completely different beast and you're not going to be ready for it. Now, this is a life hack for learning languages. Daily journaling. You can either do it in the form of writing or video. I say both, right? Interchange. One day you write your journal, the other day you speak your journal on a video. Again, we're undergoing this process of active recall, but then we're also going back to being children again. Like when we learned our native language, where basically, we used to go to school and they tell us, oh, write how your weekend was, in 2 paragraphs or whatever they would tell us, right? But that actually works, right? So when you finish your day, before you go to bed, try and write or record a video journaling, okay? And just express what happened that day. And I guarantee you'll see so many gains. Now, in terms of writing the journal, please don't type it, because if you type it, it's going to be less effective. There was a recent study carried out in young adults and children known as the pen is mightier than the keyboard. And it demonstrated that handwriting basically engages the brain more and engages more areas of the brain more than typing does, which basically created the optimal conditions for learning. So if you're journaling every single day, writing the words that you've basically recalled from your brain after all the immersion you've been doing, and you basically solidify everything you've been doing with the writing, it's just OP. You're just gonna finish every day, you're getting another percentage point on your journey to 100% capacity in speaking your target language. And this is something I've done a lot. End of my days, I journal. Video, writing, doesn't matter that much as long as you're doing it interchangeably every single day of the week. And the thing is, learning a language, you can't half-ass it. You have to go hard. You have to actually put the work in. You have to every single day do at least, I would say 30 minutes minimum, bare minimum if it's a bad day, but at least like an hour to 2 hours if you can of active learning. And that's coupled with the immersion. And I'm telling you now, if you can do that every single day, remain consistent, because the things we want in this life are achieved through consistency and perseverance, right? If you could do that every single day, I guarantee you will accomplish your goals in the language faster than you ever imagined possible. Bonus tip. Please stop using Duolingo. I know people that use Duolingo and they are nowhere, and I don't say this from an arrogant perspective, but they are nowhere near me in terms of language learning capacity as me. And that's just because I've acknowledged that there are more effective ways to learn language than Duolingo. If you're gonna use Duolingo, use it as a supplement on top of everything I've just told you. Don't use it as your main port of call for learning a language. It will not work. You will remain having difficulty with the language because you're relying on something that doesn't really simulate reality very well. There's so much nuance in language learning that you have to learn through immersing yourself and through doing all these habits I just gave you, not through talking to a bird on an app. That doesn't really give you sentences that make sense. So yeah, avoid Duolingo. Anyway, those are things that help me. Comment down below what language you're learning because I'd like to know. I'm planning to learn French this year. I will document the process and upload a video on this channel. And leave a like, share, comment, subscribe, and yeah, peace.